Drop the gavel.
This is the first one.
So I would like to call SAU 21 Joint School Board Public Hearing and Meeting to order for May 24th, 2023. And we'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray.
Thank you. Okay, first item on our agenda is the public hearing for the public hearing on the acceptance of a gift.
So I'll ask Dr. Ferreira to weigh in, but we've been offered, I think we talked about this at the March meeting, from the Brook a gift of $115,000 to fund the hiring of a full-time social worker for 1 year to serve the SAU 21 school districts.
Okay.
So the floor is open if people have comments.
Does anyone have any comments or questions regarding the acceptance of the gift for this evening?
I just have a quick question. I think we discussed this at the last meeting, but I know for the 1 year, and they kind of gave us like the percentage of the probability of them continuing. Do we have that? Or do we not have that?
So
Something that we would have to find going forward.
yeah, so my intent would not be to add this to the operating budget moving forward. The Brook has indicated that they have been successful in working in communities to create 501c3s with partners who have funded like positions moving forward in those other communities. So aspirationally, they hope to do that. At this time, we're only looking to adopt the position for 1 year, and I would not be proposing it in our budget come fall.
Meredith, was there something about 50,000? I'm like trying to think back to what they said, but wasn't there something with like the 50,000 that they knew they could do in upcoming years, or they would fund it halfway, guaranteed, or was there something additional after the first year?
So again, they would potentially fund a 501c3, work with partners to create a 501c3. They would potentially match funding if community partners were able to raise half.
Okay.
But again, that's all hypothetical
Right.
and not something we have control over.
Okay.
If a 501c3 were formed, like with any other donation we accept, they would have to, offer us a donation. The board would have the opportunity to review that, have a public hearing, vote on the acceptance of any donation.
So it'll be almost like in every year, if they get it, it'll come up before us in the joint board, not going in the operating budget, not coming out of taxpayer dollars. This is like a donation from the community to help us all out.
That is correct.
Okay.
Just have
Yes.
a question. Was there ever a discussion of using those funds for rewarding our teachers and giving them bonuses? Because we had this discussion of their salaries not being increased this year as much as we wanted.
So I think you're speaking to CESPA, our support staff salaries, where we provided some one-time stipends at the discretion of the boards.
Right.
The Brooks request was to fund mental health. So no, I did not talk with them about teacher salaries because they very clearly wanted to fund a mental health related initiative.
Was there an explanation as to why they thought, they would have probably told you or us why they thought this was such a targeted issue?
They've seen mental health as a challenge within their own organization. They see that in the other communities in which they operate. They have funded mental health support in the community that they serve in Nevada and wanted to extend that opportunity here where they also operate locally.
And I would assume if that number is the number that they're giving, that they're to distribute that over teachers from all districts would be much more difficult to give a substantial amount versus funding one position to help them in what they're doing. Because basically a social worker will be helping with the mental health piece to take something off our teachers' plates, to not put as much of a burden on them for that. Would that be?
Sure. Again, I didn't discuss funding teachers with them or salary stipends with them directly. They were looking to directly dive into mental health. And in working with our team and our administrative team, the feedback was that they felt a social worker position would be most beneficial.
So they presented a plan with a very targeted idea where that money was gonna go.
So they presented the idea that they wanted to support mental health. What ideas were we willing to bring to the table? So we went back, talked with our administrative team, we talked to our central office team, and then with our administrative team about potential supports in the area of mental health, and concluded that a social worker would be the best avenue.
Anything else?
Just curious, curious as to the acknowledgement, will that be something that the PR person will help put together, that goes out to the paper or something?
So PR firm is not on board. They wouldn't come on board until July,
Oh,
but we, you know, we certainly would partner with the Brook. If they're choosing to do a media release, we certainly would do that, and we'll include that information in newsletters as well as a thank you note.
Super. Any other comments, questions?
No, I think it's great. The Brook as a gaming operation in New Hampshire, I don't recall the exact requirements, but they have to donate a significant portion of their proceeds, and the fact that they're willing to give it to education, I think is a benefit. I've been in organizations in New Hampshire before that were on the receiving ends of their funds, and it's quite generous. You can't rely on it every year because everybody wants a piece of that revenue, but the fact that we're able to receive it this year, I think is a benefit, and hopefully it'll work out for us in the future.
Agreed.
So you do need to open the floor for public comment on this item.
Okay. I'd like to go ahead and open the floor for public comment. If anyone would like to come up and say a few words. Is there a time for Okay. Sure.
Is this just for this item? Because I want to address another item, so I can do that.
So this is the public hearing on this item?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Public comment.
I don't really have anything prepared other than there's a lot of talk about mental health.
Can you provide your name first?
I'm sorry. Anne Marie Banfield, 7 Highlander Drive in Northampton. And I certainly wouldn't argue against that. I think that's a given. The only thing I would suggest, though, is if you're going to provide this position, then it seems to me you would want to hire somebody with the education and credentials to actually treat a child who needs mental health services. And I'm talking about a PhD level child psychologist. They can prescribe medication, they follow code of ethics. You're getting the best treatment for your kids. So, you know, and in terms of privacy, they have to follow code of ethics. They're licensed. It seems to me that if we're going to do this, this is the way you would want to do it. This is what I would do for my kids. This is how I would want my kids treated. It's like if they have anxiety or depression, I want them treated by somebody who has that education and clinical training background. So that would be my one point. The other point is because it's not funded every year, I think that's a problem. So if this was for a child psychologist that was independent and we knew that they were going to provide the best care within following code of ethics, respecting privacy, all of that, and it was funded every year, I think that might be a worthy consideration. I'm just not convinced that this is the best way to treat a child's mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else related to this particular? Yeah.
It's very difficult to hear from here. I don't know if your mics are on, but they're not getting out here.
Okay.
Hello?
They're primarily designed to pick up for broadcasting, not really for the room, but
Yeah.
thank you. It will remind people to speak up.
Some of us have assistance in that regard. My name is Diane Martin. I'm a resident in Hampton Falls. I don't have a statement, but I do have questions. I have 4 questions. Would you like them in a bunch, or would you like them in sequence? What's best?
You could do in a bunch or in sequence.
Okay.
We just, during public comment, we're not permitted to actually answer those questions, but we'll definitely take them into consideration, and if a follow-up's necessary, we can work on that for you.
So the donation and this new position were discussed within the administration apparently during the time of presentations for the budget. But the need for such a position was not identified at that time, and it was not discussed in any public way. What data demonstrates the need for the proposed new position, given the decline in student population? What affected the change of the position from being what was styled as an outreach specialist for coordinating services to the lengthy list of tasks outlined in the updated job description that you've included? Most of the responsibilities described are not specific. They don't indicate what the individual is expected to do, actually. So what are the metrics for evaluation for determining the continuing need for the position and the success of any individual who's hired? Every position I have ever hired for had very clear expectations for performance, and I was always tasked with very clear expectations for how to evaluate that individual. That is apparently lacking. And finally, how do the responsibilities of this position correspond and compare to the existing responsibilities of the Assistant Superintendent for Special Services and existing school guidance counselors? If you're able to respond to those questions, it would be very helpful. If I sit down, I may not be able to hear you unless you shout out. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Okay.
So just to be clear, we will return to the social worker discussion later under action items, and I'm happy to try to respond to at least some of those at that time.
Thank you. Okay. So next item up is public comment. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. I'd like to close the public hearing at 6:12. Thank you, Rhonda. Okay. Next, I'd like to open public comment. For anyone like to come up and make some comments to the group?
Is this it for public comments? Okay, all right, just want to make sure I'm doing that at the right time.
Yep.
So I looked at the agenda, Anne Marie Banfield, 7 Highlander Court, Highlander Drive, Northampton. I looked at the agenda and went through the presentation tonight that will be on the Portrait of a Learner. And I just went through what was on the website, so obviously I'm just addressing that. And I feel like I'm out of turn because I'm addressing something that they haven't addressed yet, but I'm just going to bring up some questions, concerns I had about that particular document. I think it can be changed, improved. So for instance, under core theme 1, which you will be presented with, it talks about rigor, but what does that mean in terms of the curriculum, the academics in the school? So there's a portion where it talks about rigor. Will somebody lay out what that means in terms of what we have currently and where that would take us, the Portrait of the Learner? I think that would be helpful for us to know what that means. There is a reference to equity. What does that mean in terms of where we are now and what's going to change? There's a reference to support structures for all students. So what about children with IEPs? I remember 2 deliberative sessions ago, somebody got up and spoke and said that we were not going to have enough paraprofessionals in school. At least this was in Northampton. I don't know about the rest of the schools. So support structures, does that mean that we have enough in place? Do we need more? there's a section on personal pathways. What does this mean for each child? At what age is a child to determine the pathway that they take? How do you personalize an education for all children in the classroom? What does this mean for the teacher? Under core theme 2, it talks about demonstrating traits. What does this mean to change, it sounds like it's changing values in students. What does that mean? Would that conflict with family values? How would that be resolved? Is it resolved? I'd like someone to explain how you teach resilience. Can that create problems? We're talking about mental health here, and you hear, this is like the new thing is to create resilience in kids. And when I'm researching, what I'm finding is that actually has backfired, where you have kids struggling and you have kids struggling with their mental health when they're talking about trying to build resilience in kids. So what does that exactly mean? What about in that section? What about they're going through traits in this section? I didn't see honesty in there. I didn't see integrity in there. And what does self-direction look like in the classroom? Because there's a component that says more about self-direction. What does that look like in the classroom? Core theme number 3 says under essential life skills. I didn't see anything about literacy in the core subjects, such as math, science, language arts, history, and civics. Under core theme number 4, this area is focused on the child's mental health. Any mental health assessments or treatment should be handled by, I believe, a PhD level child psychologist. Child psychologist would be licensed and follow the code of ethics.
And I'm so sorry, but 3 minutes are up. Do you want to just wrap up your last statement?
Try to summarize it?
Yes.
I could
In like 2 seconds.
That would help, because I do have a couple
Yes, that
other,
would be super.
things that
Yes.
maybe will be covered when
Okay.
they present it, but if not, then maybe that can be.
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Can you hear me better back there? A little? Okay. I'll keep trying. Okay. Anyone else for comment, public comment? Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep that open for the next 25 minutes or so, in case anyone else wants to come back up. Okay. Next item is approval of the minutes. I'd like to make a motion, actually, are there any, sorry, it's been a long day. I'd like to ask if we'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes as presented for March 28th, but I know that we have to ask if there's any comments or questions regarding those said minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
as presented from March 28th, 2023.
I'll second.
Super. Christina.
Me or Leslie, either one. Okay.
Okay,
2 hands, 1 hand, which way?
As long as you got one up and I can see it.
Okay.
super.
If you're at the concert.
All those in favor? What?
I would say, that's when you ask,
Oh,
are there
that's
any
when I asked the
changes
comment.
or amendments to the minutes?
Okay.
And then,
It might be easier if there are any abstentions or no's.
Yes.
Abstain.
I've got 4 abstaining,
Okay.
I'm positive.
that's
I
Jason
thought we were all here at that meeting.
and Patrick.
Oh,
I'm abstain. I was not here for the meeting.
Trisha
Trisha,
Yes.
and Renee.
And Renee. And so then the rest are,
okay.
Yes. Yes.
okay.
Any no's? Okay.
Always absent. Richard Forrest.
Okay. No. Thank you.
Thank you.
What else is new?
Okay.
I'm shocked if you showed up.
Next item, portrait of a learner, Mr. Dave.
Fancy new.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm here to present the framework for Portrait of a Learner for adoption, hopefully tonight at the joint board level. The whole presentation is in your packet, and I think just to kind of set the table for the presentation, the word framework is pretty important. I think you've all heard ad nauseum the process that we've been through to collect information from our different stakeholders, students, admin, faculty, and community at large. Just so you understand kind of what this presentation is, obviously we've distilled down the feedback from all of our stakeholders into core themes, which you can read. Each theme has kind of a standalone statement on top, usually if students will or students do something. And then below, there are keywords that were used as descriptors. Now, those keywords came directly from the feedback we received from our stakeholders. So, for instance, the word rigor showed up over and over and over again in different conversations, but also in different written feedback, for example, when we went out to our communities. So that's where those keywords came from. We actually were able to run an analysis on that to count the number of times it was used. So what you have here are 5 core themes. You have academics, you have mindsets, you have essential life skills, you have physical and mental wellness, and then you have community engagement. Those are the 5 big themes that we've pulled together as part of the Portrait of a Learner. Obviously, each one of those has some nuance and some detail. I think important to tonight's presentation is just understanding what this looks like from here. So over this summer and into the fall, there were obviously some questions about how this plays out. How is this defined at the individual school level? What does this look like? That's the work ahead of us. We've done a year's worth of data gathering and data analysis. Now we actually are able to actualize what this looks like within our schools. So you can get a picture of what that's going to look like. It's going to be come first day of school, fall time, we're going to start using these themes to guide working documents with our staff and with our administration in our schools to define exactly what these core themes look like for them. Think of it like a rubric, right? Where are we hitting these terms? Where are we hitting these keywords? And where are the gaps? Where are we falling short? So that's the work that's going to be coming in the fall, probably till right around New Year 2024, where we'll have those working documents in that 2028 plan, that 5-year plan.
So your curriculum, you're layering this into the current curriculum where you can.
Right, thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. It's going to affect everything, frankly, but particularly with respect to curriculum. This is where we start looking at curriculum adoption processes, some of the assessment practices that are used across the SAU. How can we start making them common? How can we look at some efficiencies there? What our budgeting schedule is for purchasing programs, and can we line that up in order to better inform like a Hampton Falls and a Northampton decision, right? Corresponding for curriculum. So all those things are going to work both at the individual school level, because that's important, but then we're also going to be able to cross-thread it with our principals at an SAU level. So hopefully we'll get the best of both worlds as a result of this moving forward.
It's an incredible undertaking. I'm so thrilled to see this being implemented. Do you have any thoughts on how your next step? I know you mentioned curriculum, but when you took, I guess, the mechanics and the tools, what are you thinking there? Or is it too early?
Yeah, no, it's not too early. So we have draft working documents for each one of our schools, and basically what the schools are going to be asked to do is take a look at how they're hitting these indicators, and particularly what the timeline is for implementation or improvement, who's responsible, and what those measurables are. So throughout this whole process, I know I've been presenting to every community member that's been listening, right, will listen to me. But yeah, we're going to be able to define school level data that's going to reinforce that. And if we have trouble, then that's a problem, right? If it's not measurable, then that's a problem. We have to look at ways to start measuring what rigor looks like within, Hampton Falls and middle school, for example. Quick note on visual.
Love those graphics.
Yeah, we did. We ended up with the circle graphic. There is a secondary graphic that I just received today. Too late to throw into the presentation, but it's really cool. It's got the same colors, but those themes are actually built into waves. It looks like a rectangle, and looks like the ocean, and the words are written into those waves. So we have a primary graphic, which may or may not have, we can have individual school logos in the middle there if we that football. But we also have the secondary image as well, which I think will be great for letterhead branding. And, you know, it becomes something, hopefully, that we recognize and own and kind of all try to live up to as we go into 23, 24. It's been a great process. I mean, just thank you guys for their support, but I want to thank the community for the support as well. Sorry, Meredith.
No, I was just going to say, when we talked about goals over the next couple of years, we talked about trying to identify the measurable goals and objectives tied to the strategic plan or the portrait of a learner by October, late October, for that joint board meeting, and then having sort of quarterly updates, right? January, March, June. So this is, as Dave says, there's a lot of work that's gone into this, but honestly, this is the foundational work. This is the easy part of the work. Now it's really layering on, okay, now what are the specific goals and objectives tied to each of those pillars that we're going to be working to accomplish over the next several years.
And all of this is it's also tied into like the current educational plan. We heard in the public comment some questions about under life skills, like not having mathematics. I think that's clearly going to be utilizing this framework to boost all the other subjects up. Is that the plan? This is going to be added life skills that, you know, the community members have been looking for kids coming out of grade school, kids coming out of high school to have, correct?
That's exactly right. When we have students telling us directly, I need to learn how to balance a budget. I need to learn how to pay taxes. I need to learn how to run a spreadsheet, you know, whatever. Those are things that a student can identify as important to them. Frankly, a lot of students talked about screen time. They talked about like work-life balance. I mean, it was incredibly enlightening, the feedback we got from kids. And yes, this is going to serve some of those needs that have been expressed not only by our kids but across the gamut.
Well, I think it's a great thing because, I mean, you look at school 20 years ago versus now, I find that my kids have gotten a far better education in the last couple of years with all the outdoor stuff that Seabrook's been doing. I don't know if the other, you know, SAUs are being outside as much. I feel like they're getting a lot more life lessons, and I think this portrait of a learner, by going to the community and finding out, like, what do you want to see out of a high school graduate to make them successful? And these are things that people have been complaining about for years, that they have zero life skills.
Yep.
They have your basic school education coming out, but they never prepared you for life. I think that this is, I mean, food nutrition is huge. Cooking on this also, like, these are things that everyone needs to learn how to do to be healthy. And to incorporate that in a high school and in grade school to get people out, then it's not like people scrambling once they're out on their own. So I understand that there's the questions that are asked by the public, and when they don't see, well, what are we going to do with math? Just want to make sure it's out there. These are going to also be building blocks and added on things that make sure that we have more well-rounded students exiting school into becoming young adults.
Yep. I think it was incredible to see the number of commonalities come across as an SAU. Way more commonalities than we had differences, A. And B, there's a lot of stuff in here that's going to be like an affirmation of things like Seabrook's doing an outdoor ed, like huge thing right now, right? I think there's going to be a lot of pride built into that when they check it against some of the priorities that the community has. And they're going to say, wow, we're hitting a lot of these boxes. So I'm excited about that conversation as well.
Excellent, me too.
And having been a part of more than one of the meetings and seeing community and then, you know, teachers and admin working with that piece, and then seeing all the information that you guys have collected with the student feedback, it's very encouraging to see how many commonalities go from adult to student and community and teacher, and how everybody wants the same thing. So there has been a ridiculous amount of work been put into this, and I think this is just like a tiny little minuscule piece of what is really there, and having the binders and seeing all the information is really, it really gives you a good picture of what is to come, and I think it's only going to be positive. It's only going to go up from here, and what we can expect from our students in the future, hopefully when my elementary school kids get to high school, you know, to see that difference, I think is going to be, it's really exciting. It's exciting to see us moving in a positive direction and only getting better from here.
So I think, unless there are more questions, I think the ask for tonight is to adopt as a framework these priorities as under portrait, obviously with the intent to give periodic regular updates on measurables, performance at the individual school level, et cetera, which we're excited to do.
Sorry, Dave, I do have a question.
Sure, Joe.
First, thank you, obviously, and it's nice to see the descriptors for each, what are they called, cores, as actions. I know we talked about that in one meeting, and it's nice to say, like, this is what we plan to achieve, you know, with these aspects. Is there a time frame for this strategy, or will there be one in the development process? I know that we're building the way in which we envision education to move forward, and obviously we can't land all of this in 24 months, right? This is a huge initiative, and there's going to have to be phasing, and resources are going to have to be built in over a period of time.
Thank you for the question. And we've had this conversation as we lead up, believe it or not, into the leadership retreat this summer. I don't want to think about next year, but we're thinking about it. So when we spoke to students, teachers, admin, et cetera, this year, the frame was Vision 2027, 5 years out. I think, you know, in the leadership retreat this summer, in order to give principals kind of the wherewithal and a frame, it's going to be Vision 2028. We're going to take a look 5 years down the road at what you want to see out of your programs and services, curriculum, and student supports. That said, I know there are going to be short and long-term objectives.
I'll make the motion to adopt the Portrait of a Learner framework as presented.
I'll
Second.
second.
Oh, I raised my hand higher.
All those in favor?
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Amazing. Oh, one abstain, sorry. All those opposed. And one abstain. There we go. Gotcha. Sorry about that, Michael. Okay.
Motion passed.
Awesome. Thank you, Rhonda. Next, we have the acceptance of the gift.
Yes. So just to respond to a couple of the questions, and Dr. Toomey can certainly weigh in as well. So first of all, I think there are two different jobs. The social worker position was only ever conceived as a social work position. I think the position that Ms. Martin was referring to was the early intervention outreach specialist, was just a different position that was funded through largely McKinney-Vento homeless grant funds. That was discussed at the board level back in the fall. It's a different position. They're not the same. They were never conceived to be the same. With respect to data demonstrating the need for the new position, I don't have any on hand, but I can tell you that we regularly as an administrative team and with our counseling staff and existing social work and mental health staff and our school nurses have conversations about student mental health. Those of you who were able to attend our mental health panel discussion this fall heard testimony from parents that are waiting 6 months to try to access outside resources and supports for their children. They're on waiting lists to see counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health providers. This position is not intended to primarily provide counseling services to students. This position really is it supports in crises, and it does a lot of outward referral and connections. We have existing social workers in Seabrook and at Winnacunnet. We have 2 in Seabrook, one that focuses primarily on students with special educational needs, the other that services the population at large. In Seabrook alone, we have 19% of our children at the elementary school who are homeless, who qualify as homeless, that are living in what is considered inadequate housing or doubled up in housing because of economic conditions or other circumstances. We have the current prevalence estimates are roughly 25% of adolescents are experiencing anxiety or depression. Those waiting lists are long, and we have children who are regularly, not individual children aren't regularly in crisis, some may be, but we regularly have children in crisis in the public schools. Our high school social worker, for example, it's not unusual for her to be triaging a couple of students a day for suicidality, and doing those scales and making those connections and contacting parents and working with outreach crisis services and or the hospital, which I know you have some familiarity with Danielle, to try to find places for those children to go and to make sure they're getting the care and the attention they deserve. So, again, while I don't have hard data on hand, that is some of the testimony I would share with you that we've received. With respect to evaluation, this position is covered under our collective bargaining agreement. It is a licensed position, but would be covered under our evaluation metrics and procedures. So our master evaluation plan that is approved at the board level and at the state level every 5 years. And as far as, again, comparison to existing positions, we have school psychologists. A lot of their role involves testing. No one in our school system prescribes medications. That is not our role, nor do we want to take that on. But school psychologists tend to do more individual assessment, some organizational consultation. School social workers are really focused on identifying students at risk, providing early interventions, and coordinating those outreach services with parents and community agencies and school personnel, and again, some immediate crisis and problem solving. School counselors are doing small and large group counseling. They're doing vocational and career development work with students. They do develop some large group developmental interventions, teaching in the classrooms, providing support around social emotional learning. So some of the distinctions from my perspective. I don't know, Dr. Toomey, if you would want to add anything to that.
No, I think you covered it beautifully. Clearly there's an express need. I meet with all of our behavioral health providers, our psychologists, our social workers, our counselors frequently. And, we talk about the case studies and what the needs are, and there's clearly a need for additional support. This position will be spread very, very thin. It's wonderful. We're very grateful. It's probably not enough, but we really appreciate the opportunity.
So just a bit of, I guess maybe anecdotal evidence. Most people know I work on an ambulance. I run a fire department. I coach several sports, mostly between the ages of about 3rd grade up to 5th graders. And firsthand knowledge of watching these kids, like a lot of kids are struggling with mental health. I mean, through COVID, before COVID, after COVID, I mean, it seems like the struggle is far greater these days. And I know in Seabrook we have a homeless problem, we have a low income problem, and these kids struggle. Like, they're being raised by the rec, they're being raised by the coaches, they're being raised by the teachers, and there's not enough mental health to go around. I go to the VA. The VA is a disaster for a 100% disabled vet to get into, and I know families that have even harder time to get their children into this. I have had more kids in the last 3 years under the age of 18 in the back of my ambulance for either suicide attempts and or suicidal ideation and or depression that hasn't quite got there. The solution that is out there in the public right now is to call 911. I show up in my ambulance with a smile on my face, and I bring you to Exeter Hospital, or I bring you to Anna Jake's Hospital, where they're keeping children in observation rooms in the emergency room for sometimes 14 days. 14 days. Anna Jake's is an absolute zoo on any given day. I couldn't imagine having a mental health problem and having to be stuck in a cell and watching all the rest of the stuff. That the lights are never out. Nobody's ever quiet. It's not making, there was a girl that was 16 years old that was in there for 14 plus days because they couldn't place her anywhere. Now, we talk budgets, we talk all sorts of stuff, getting things into the operating budget, and that hurts taxpayers as well. Accepting a gift from a place like the Brook and hopefully getting a 501c3 to put this back onto the community. Like, we take your kids in. The teachers are doing an outstanding job. First responders are doing a great job. The counselors, the coaches, but we're only so thin. And to have somebody there at the school that these kids can talk to, and I know Seabrook has done a pretty good job. My son goes in and talks to the people when he's stressed out, and he comes home, and we're a pretty stable household. I couldn't imagine what it's like. So I understand that there's always a lot of, doubt, and there's a little, cloudiness on why the Brook would want to give this, and I've seen stuff on Facebook and that it's a gaming organization. Why are they giving money to the schools? What's the agenda? I don't see an agenda particularly. They're going to give us $115,000 to fund a position, And this is what they do. They give to charities, they've given to the fire departments, the police departments, other 501c3s, the PTO. It's amazing what it's hard to believe what these kids have gone through over the last couple of years. And any bit of help that we can get that's not on the back of the taxpayers, because if the school's hurting to provide money, you're damn well be right that all the parents and the rest of us property owners and taxpayers, we're all hurting as well. So I say we take any help that we can get at any time, because I'll tell you what, watching these kids struggle and lose their mind over little things at sports, you can tell that the home life is messed up, that they're depressed, that there's, like, I've had 5th graders tell me that they want to kill themselves after basketball games because they don't want to go home. Like, that's not okay, and I have to deal with that as a coach, as a medic, as another parent, as a community member. And I like the fact that we have a place like the Brook that's going to look and say, our kids are struggling, let's provide a little bit of money, let's see if we can get some more to come in and make it a permanent position without absolutely destroying the taxpayers, because we're all hurting as well. But I think this is a good thing, because I definitely have seen it firsthand, all the way from soup to nuts, from home all the way to the hospitals. And I don't want a kid sitting in the hospital for 14, 16 days, because that's not mental health help. They're waiting there for a bed to actually talk to a provider, and they're getting worse and worse and worse. Then they go home, and then they go back again, and they're put right back in the same room, and they sit there for another 2 weeks, and they go up to 2 North over at Anna Jake's, and they get sent right back out. It's just rinse and repeat. So having some foundations in our schools where our kids are spending a lot of times, I don't personally see this as a bad thing. And I'm not the biggest guy that trusts the government and all sorts of stuff. I'll tell you that right now. But help is help at this point, and I think it's a great thing. I think we need to accept it.
Sounds like you should make a motion.
Yeah, I think you should. I'm very passionate about that.
I make a motion that we accept the donation of $115,000 from the Brook to fund the hiring of a full-time social worker for 1 year to serve SAU 21 school districts.
Now you should see if there's any discussion.
Any other discussion?
Actually, can I just say one thing?
Yes.
I know you spoke to it a little bit, about their reasons for doing this. And there's no backdoor thing, there's nothing. These people who own the Brook are doing this because they did it in Nevada, as we know. They came and spoke, and they did it in Nevada because they saw the need there. They see the need here, and they are a group of people who want to give back to the communities that they're in. There's no other agenda there other than to help the families and the students in this area. So it's coming from a really good place.
I would just add 2 cents. Just from the conversation, I would just consider moving forward, it would be, make this happen yearly, at least 1 position. It sounds like we could use multiple, but consider during the budget season. I know you mentioned that you didn't want this, but this, I would support this being part of OpEx for the SAU, at least funding 1, having this, doing some sort of cost share, if not more. So when we get to that, for consideration.
Any other comments? Okay. All those in favor?
And that looks like everybody, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna mark that unanimous.
Thank you.
So just public comment, I know we
Yeah.
had some students join us, just if there was any other public comment, while the floor is open before we close it.
We still have 4 minutes left in public comment. Would anyone else like to come up and speak before we close public comment? Okay. All right. Moving on. All right, next is the job description for the social worker.
Yes, so this is consistent with the job description we have in place for our existing social work positions, both in Seabrook and at Winnicott. This is obviously an SAU job description. The position would report to Dr. Toomey. We posted a draft version of this position with the job advertisement as was discussed in March, but we would like the board to consider final approval tonight. Super.
approve the job description for social worker as presented.
I'll second. Oh, sorry, her hand was way higher. She got it.
Well, no, there was a pause. At least
Lisa's not playing. She's not playing, she's coming right for you.
Best it's
I'm really good at raising my hand.
Very good.
I'm just like, second.
All right. Any,
Just wait for your adjournment.
any comments before we vote?
I have a question, like,
Yes.
where do you envision this person, like, be located? Are they gonna float between the schools? Are they gonna be located in the SAU office?
I'd say we're still evaluating that. I expect there will be some space carved out, shared space within each of our schools, but we'll most likely be operating out of the SAU or the high school primarily, just because that's where we have the largest population and the most space. But I would expect that in Hampton Falls, in Northampton, in Southampton, either the use of the counselor's office or an office space that could be available for this individual to meet with students and families.
Question two. For this particular position, it's for 185 days. How does that compare to the existing contracts for the social workers that we do have?
Yeah, so most are at least that same teacher contract year. Some have an additional 10 days built in that's been added to the budget. We didn't propose that at this time because this position will be kind of new on board this year. That may be something we would look to expand to in the future if funding continues to be available.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor?
I see hands up, we're on board.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Correct.
Motion passed, unanimous.
Thank you, Rhonda. Next is summer hiring.
So we don't currently have any vacancies in the SAU, and we hope that we won't have any. However, there are times when that does occur, and so typically we ask, particularly for the joint board, but we ask the individual boards as well to authorize the superintendent to hire during the summer. If it were an administrative position, I would certainly attempt to call a quorum of the joint board together to approve any such hiring. But if we had other openings, we'd want to be able to proceed with filling those and not be trying to pull 13 of you together in the summer, or a minimum of 13.
I'll make.
Motion to authorize the superintendent of schools to offer contracts during June, July, August.
Second.
Were you starting it? Sorry.
No, of
She
course
said,
not.
you're too fast, Leslie.
So
Can't
good.
believe it. I know.
Any
The
questions or
fastest.
comments?
So-
I know, right? Any questions or comments? All right. All those in favor?
I see all hands raised. Okay.
All right.
Motion passed, unanimous.
Thank you. Matt, you're up. Welcome. Thank you.
And do you want to close?
Thank you.
Oh, excuse me. Public comments now closed. Thank you.
So I've included 3 documents on board docs, the fiscal year 2023 expenditure report, revenue report, as well as a donation form. So for the expenditure report, we currently have a balance of $127,000, and that's with 1 month remaining in the fiscal year. I will note, however, that we did under budget this current year 2022-2023 budget by $78,000 with the intent to use unreserved fund balance if needed to supplement the budget. So the actual balance is just under $50,000. So this represents essentially no change from the last joint board meeting held in March. There was about $130,000 at that point. I do not expect any changes on the expenditure side or any significant changes between now and the end of the fiscal year. So similarly, on the revenue side, there also is no significant change from that March joint board meeting. We are tracking well. The revenue report shows a current surplus revenue balance of about $30,000. And this was due to, banking interest from this past year's interest rate increases, the New Hampshire retirement system refund, and energy rebates. I also anticipate receiving some additional indirect costs revenue, and that's for the administration of the federal grants. It's important to note that the energy rebates in the report shows a pretty significant surplus amount. However, those funds will be allocated to our various districts, so that will be allocated at the end of this fiscal year. So the SAU will not be seeing that revenue, and those energy rebates are due to us entering into the group net metering agreement, and that was with Briar Hydroelectric. And that was our means to monetize sustainable energy credits. So the remaining balance that we recognize at the end of the year based on any unused operating expenditures as well as surplus revenue, that amount will be added to the SAU's unreserved fund balance. Currently, our balance is $227,000, and this serves as our safeguard against any unanticipated costs. So all of our individual school districts have expendable trusts. They have soon to have in future years the ability to use the fund balance retention fund to set aside funds. But the SAU has really no buffer in the event of unanticipated costs. Additionally, we are utilizing that unreserved fund balance in our planning for capital projects. So I will note that our next capital project that will need to be completed is the roof replacement on the SAU building, and that's anticipated to be done in 3 to 5 years. So we're building up that reserve in order to fund that project. So the third document that is included on board docs is a donation form. So we received a donation valued at $250 from Waypoint. This is for supplies and food for family night out, and this occurred in Seabrook at Rockingham Village. Since the donation is under $500, the board isn't required to vote to accept the donation, but we thank Waypoint for this very generous donation. I'll also note that this donation was a direct result of our new preschool outreach coordinator, who just recently started in the last month, in April. So she's already out there, working with various organizations and in our schools with that effort. I know there's another donation that the Seabrook School District will be receiving from the United Way at the next school board meeting for a few $1,000s due to her efforts. Be happy to answer any questions in regard to any of these documents.
I didn't quite follow what you meant on the expenditure side. So if I look at your report, it shows we have $127,000 available budget and under budgeted something. So
Yeah.
Is something else going to come through here
It's not going to come through. It's just the report indicates what was allocated, but not the money that we actually received. So in reality, that's what we budgeted for, but we received $78,000 less than that total amount. Because when we created the budget 2 years ago for this current year, we determined to utilize unreserved fund balance to reduce that budget amount. You're welcome. Good question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Meredith. Superintendent update.
Sure. So first, I just want to acknowledge that today happens to be the 1-year anniversary of the shooting in Uvalde, Texas. And I think, the journey obviously with school safety and security continues, but it certainly preys on the hearts and minds of teachers and students, and I know all of you as board members as well. So just acknowledging that. First thing I wanted to speak to briefly was communications and PR, just a little update on that. I think as we talked about at the last meeting, we are moving forward with JPG, Guilfoyle Communications to start in July working with us. And as part of working through that process, we developed some priorities in putting out an RFP. So I was just going to share a few of those highlights. Our priorities for the upcoming year will be obviously onboarding that contracted communications support this summer, refreshing our K-8 websites and launching mobile apps for improved accessibility by this fall. We'll continue, or I will continue to issue monthly letters from our office, and we hope that there'll also be those continued timely communications when something arises. And then by January, we'll be working with Guilfoyle to put together a more complete communications plan, which includes not just our ongoing positive communications, but also crisis communications. Some of the opportunities we had identified going forward were, again, increasing community outreach with proactive positive stories about our district, students, staff, and programs, expanded use of social media, support and preparedness support and preparedness for crisis communications, media training with the administrative team, and that's actually scheduled to happen at our summer retreat with our administrators this summer. That's part of the service that Guilfoyle will provide to us. And then just increased communication accessibility for parents. So launching those mobile apps for our websites, we think will give parents enhanced access to the information we're trying to put out there. So again, this has been part of a process. A lot of that happened earlier, but I was supposed to kind of update you on those pieces, and so I wanted to make sure to speak to that this evening. Happy to answer any questions as we go through, but then I also had legislative updates on my list. I know most of you received the New Hampshire School Board Association updates, so I'll try not to belabor this too much. Just a couple of notable bills that have come through. I know one that we spoke about early in the legislative review process was multiplication tables and cursive handwriting, so that did pass. So that will be moving forward. That has to be taught by 5th grade. We're still waiting for some of the rules to potentially be codified around that. I'm not sure exactly what level of instruction, if any, is being specified with that. Anyway. I won't belabor that, but that has passed. The SB 272, the Parental Bill of Rights, was indefinitely postponed last week. HB 367, which is about eligibility for the Education Freedom Account program, was passed by the Senate. So it's increasing the income level for that. Right now, I think the proposal is to move it from 300 to 350%. But that has been of the federal poverty guidelines, but that is sent back to Senate Finance for review. So no final details on that as of yet. Let's see, there was a bill related to, I know we were talking about social work and emergency behavioral health services and crisis programs. The bill that passed the House, not directly related to education, but will allow insurance to cover those services and supports being provided, even if it's not provided at a hospital or medical setting. So if a crisis team is called, that can still be eligible for insurance coverage and reimbursement, which again makes the services more available and helps prevent people spending a couple of weeks at a time in a hospital setting. Let's see, I had a whole bunch of them that I could speak to, but and Renee, you can certainly jump in too if there are any that stood out to you. Many of the others requiring student identification cards to include the National Eating Disorders Hotline. So last year we added the Suicide Prevention Hotline. Though I did hear this morning that they're just basically disabling the Suicide Prevention Hotline, moving to chat features rather than a phone call. So, who knows what that will mean. I guess the website will be on IDs, or we can have a phone number that's not active.
They're gonna use the chat GPT to try
Well,
to solve mental
Oh
health.
my gosh.
Awful.
Actually, what I heard, some of the reporting that I heard related to the National Eating Disorders Hotline was that they were, while eating disorders may have been an underlying issue, they were more frequently getting calls for suicidality and depression. And so they were trying to refer in many cases to the suicide prevention hotline. And so anyway, we'll see whether or not there is actually a phone number moving forward. Bills regarding lead testing in children, again, not directly related to schools, but has a potential impact for us. That was passed by the Senate. The bill HB 377 relative to screening and intervention and for dyslexia and related disorders, and establishing, in addition to adequate education grants for certain people screened for dyslexia and related disorders, also passed the Senate. Again, waiting to kind of see what the final version details are in terms of impact to school. And we're not done yet, right? The session runs up until June 30th, so what typically happens is a lot of dust settles at the end. Some things get tacked onto the budget, some things get pulled off at the last minute, and we spend the summer, and often good chunks of the summer now, because so many bills have passed in the last few years, trying to unpack all the implications for education and working with the School Boards Association and School Administrators Association to understand what new requirements may be in place for us in September or later.
In September, so some of these would be enacted.
Some go into effect 60 days after passage, some go into effect, 6
You
months.
get hung up on when you just mentioned on just like the screening portion of this, so that falls on the select number of staff, so then that workload gets increased.
Yeah, I mean, we already do screen,
Sure.
right?
So there's
It's
some
already a
level,
requirement
so-
to do that at K2 for children, to screen for dyslexia and related disorders, but there are some timelines attached to this and some reporting requirements in the draft bill, or that were in the draft bill. So again, exactly what will be required? Is there a new reporting form? Is there, we don't know yet.
There's no subsidies for this, or any sort of support funding for any extra work that's going to go.
Well, it says there may be increased amounts in the adequacy grants, but, but finance and the budget are
So
determined
basically,
later,
no.
so.
Probably.
Anyway, and then, just 2 other things. I know a couple of you were able to attend the session on the Ed 306s, the rules for public education, with former chair of the state board, Fred Ramonti, whose organization, now no one will know who I am. His organization contracts, was a contract with the state to provide outreach and work on the rewrite of these. Those still have not gone to the state board for adoption. I don't anticipate that they'll be on the June agenda. They could be, but I'm thinking it will likely be fall, and so then it will be 180 days from once they're placed on a state board agenda before the state board takes final action on those. But again, there could be significant implications for public education and what we're required to teach or not teach, and how we go about that, and who's licensed to do it. And anyway, a lot of variables in that. And then the last thing I was asked to just mention briefly was, well, I have one other. So 2. One I was asked to, the other one I'm just doing. But the one I was asked to speak about was the Anxious Nation film screening that we hosted in conjunction with Seacoast Mental Health and the National New Hampshire chapter of the National Alliance for Mental Illness. About a week and a half ago, we had similar turnout to what we had in the fall for a mental health panel discussion, probably 125 or so people. The film, if you haven't had a chance to see it, is about 90 minutes long, and it sort of walks through the experiences of some children and families in dealing with anxiety, and the different forms that can take, and people's individual experiences with that. And I would say in general, it's a hopeful message, right, around treatment and supports are available for that. And I think it just acknowledges that it's a fairly common experience for people today. And so if you're struggling with this, either as a child or as a parent, you're not alone. Lots of other people are going through this, and there are resources and supports available to help you. And you can suffer from anxiety and still have a great, wonderful life and be very successful. So
You can watch that now, right?
Yes, it is available for streaming now. I know.
I saw it too, and I would suggest anyone with kids should watch it. I really do. I thought it was that good. You know, it was.
Do we know what streaming thing it's on?
I don't.
I don't. I think you just typed it in. It would probably YouTube maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's
Asking for a
subscription.
friend,
I
of
think it's a
course.
pay-for stream.
It may be on Seacoast Mental Health site
Okay.
too.
Oh, yeah.
I'll look.
Yeah.
Seekers Mental
If you
Health.
can't find it, just let me know.
Would that be included in teachers' training and?
So certainly teachers can use that for professional development. I know some of our staff were able to attend the screening that evening. I don't know in our limited couple of days before we come back to school if we will be able to show the 90-minute film, but certainly I know our counselors have spoken with faculty in their buildings about it, and I've spoken with staff in conversation, so I think people are promoting it. I don't know that we will do a whole staff viewing of the film just for time, because we have to do 2 hours of suicide prevention training, we have to do emergency management training. Dave has the list. It's lengthy. And then the last thing I would mention, the state has launched what's called No Safe Experience campaign related to fentanyl and opioid use in the state of New Hampshire. 434 overdose deaths in 2022. From substances that included fentanyl, and I don't know, you probably can't see this, but this is a penny, and next to it are 3 little dots. That's the actual size of the amount of fentanyl that can kill a human, right? It is minuscule, and there are lots of non-prescription, fake prescription pills containing, these potentially lethal doses of fentanyl. So again, just trying to really educate the public about what's out there, the risks, to only order safe, approved drugs from your local pharmacy, prescription medications from your local pharmacy. Again, I'm sure, Patrick, you can attest to the number of overdoses due to fentanyl and other opiates. So there is a real risk. The state has a website and a campaign. It's nosafeexperience.org, where you can pick up additional information and flyers. We have some, and there are more, that I hope to pick up and sort of share out in schools, certainly to share with families before kids go off for the summer.
Fentanyl is, it's not Narcan resistant, but so fentanyl is 1,000 times stronger than what morphine is. Morphine is the same similar compound that would be found in heroin. So the people that have typically done heroin, when they switch to fentanyl, they're getting something that's 1,000 times the strength. In the 10 years I've been a medic, I used to be able to give 0.5 milligrams of Narcan to get a respiratory drive back. I'm giving upwards of like 8 to 16 milligrams of Narcan at a time.
So when we have you speak to the kids at the high school, Patrick, get it straight there.
You probably would.
Get
They
fired.
would.
Honestly, I can.
He would love that.
Honestly, consider it, drive it here at this group, but, I know I'm being lazy, but something else now,
So everything, that's the problem. These people aren't trying to make their money necessarily off fentanyl. They're trying to expand all their other drugs by putting a little bit in.
Kids, they'll see like, the hard truths, some pictures, some images, some hard data, that's like, it's here, it's, unfortunately, it's a few miles away where the pipeline comes through here, it's just, it's real, and, especially at the school,
I would have no problem talking to any group. I have talks for probably.
You might be there for 5 days talking, but.
from little kids all the way up, but it's definitely still on the forefront. We're doing overdoses every week in the field, and it takes a substantial amount of Narcan. And most people that have been around addicts or whatnot before, that they can get the home Narcan, it's not enough, or it's too much, and people don't know how to use it, and that's a whole nother topic for another day. But it's for real, and kids in high school, they try to take drugs. They think it's one thing. If there's any fentanyl in it and they go home, if they're not being watched, it takes like 5 minutes to press your respiratory drive to put you into respiratory arrest. And if no one's there to administer Narcan and or provide bagging, it can be a disaster, but, it's 1,000 times the strength of what your heroin would be. It's dangerous stuff. I'll try to be
And
quiet.
just on a related note, but, vaping continues to be a challenge, obviously, for our youth as well. And there was a study in Britain that came out in the last couple of days that just spoke to levels of lead and toxic chemicals that are being found in these cartridges because the extreme heat is causing the metals to leach into the liquids in those cartridges. So imagine that our young people are inhaling, right, those toxic chemicals and that lead into their systems as well. So obviously our work is education. We try to provide information and access to support and resources. Patrick will certainly make the high school principal and nursing and health department staff aware that you're willing to come in and talk about it.
The vapes are really dangerous too because the kids order them off of TikTok, off of Snapchat, off of Facebook, and parents have no clue because you can't trace their messages. So they come from China, the Philippines, all of that, and they're not. It's not like going to buy the Juul products that are at the actual store that are FDA-ish regulated. It's I mean, really, and some of that stuff comes in with fentanyl, some of it comes in with DMT, some of it comes in with all sorts of stuff. They think they're ordering cannabis cartridges, and they're not cannabis cartridges. These kids are on Molly, they're on DMT, they're on a whole bunch of stuff that's just, they don't know what they've got because they ordered it from someone they met off of Snapchat, and then there's no trace. Money goes, they send it out. It's like you got to be up on your kids with the social media, with the drug talks, with all that. And again, it's growing up, but it's not how we all grew up. There was no way for me to go get Chinese DMT. Like, it's a little different, but these things are, the counterfeit ones are the ones that are blowing up in kids, like getting them extremely sick. It's just stuff we see on a day-to-day basis. But
And I can say from a pulmonary research perspective, it's scary. It's incredibly scary what it's doing to young lungs and the impact it's going to have in future generations. So we're just starting to understand, really. The first wave is just getting old enough for us to see this is a huge issue.
So sorry to
Not
end
to
on
scare
such a
you.
happy note.
But kind of to scare.
But kind of.
But it's important, and
In
it's
a good
important
way.
to provide information where we can. So, thank you.
And for Anxious Nation, it looks like Amazon Prime and Apple TV. You can get it. You can
Thank you.
pay for it on Google Play or YouTube. But I would think if you have those streaming services, it should be free. If not, it looks like it's $3.99.
Anxious Nation.
$3.99?
Thank you, Meredith.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate it. Okay, future meetings. Rhonda and everyone, and Meredith and so many amazing people have put together our future board meetings calendar.
So Rhonda
Yes.
gets full credit for
All
assembling
Rhonda.
this calendar.
All Rhonda.
Just don't blame me. Show up. No, don't blame her, just answer her when she asks.
You can
Yeah.
see, there are some definitely busy weeks, and those are meetings that involve you all. There are additional meetings that might involve local budget committees that also require Matt and or I to be out interfacing with those bodies. So it gets tough for us to move things in those weeks where you see, highlights on every day of the week. Those windows are pretty tough, so if you are aware of a conflict early on, please take this, review it, add it to your calendars. But if you're aware of conflicts early on, please reach out to your board chair and Rhonda so that we can make any adjustments we need to early on.
We have to meet in person now, right?
We do. We have to have at least a quorum of each board present for an in-person meeting. Or a meeting.
And I don't know if you guys realize, but this has already been revised once. It was put together, and then we learned of, Matt shared with us, he got some information on some of the town's budget committees, and so that already caused some conflict, and it's already been revised as a second revision. So,
Yeah.
we've tried to get as much input from all of the towns and communities that, play into creating this calendar, so it's pretty tight.
Yeah.
Thank you for all that.
Did a great
Yeah.
job, Rhonda.
Amazing.
Good job,
I'll
Rhonda.
wait for all your invites, so I can
Yeah.
click yes.
Oh, yeah, just wait for those.
And then forget about them.
That's it.
In your individual board packets, and then your dates will be highlighted.
Yeah.
And then once I don't wanna scare you all off, I like to tease you
Oh
into
my
it.
God. Sorry.
So you'll get that, then after your board meeting, your email inbox will be filled up with calendar invites, so.
Good, super. Thank you. SAU 21 Joint Board Policy Committee meeting is on August 9th. SAU 21 Operations Committee meeting is Wednesday, October 11th. Wow.
Yeah, let's
October.
not think about that right now.
October. And the next SAU Joint Board meeting
Haven't had
is
summer yet.
October 25th. Wow. Crazy.
Be sick that day.
All right.
Make a motion to enter non-public under RSA 91-A:43:2B at 7:16.
Second.
All those in favor?
Are we gonna do a roll
Oh,
Roll call.
Roll call, yeah.
I'm just getting ready.
Jason Terry.
Yes.
Barbara Goodman.
Yes.
Renee Palm. Joe Swayze. Yes. Lisa Gallus.
Yes.
Michael Gendry.
Yes.
Danielle Strader.
Yes.
Jennifer Hubbard.
Yes.
Christina Kaiser.
Yes.
Patrick Vaughn.
Yes.
Lauren Jordan.
Yes.
Jim Keim.
Yes.
Nicole Seco.
Yes.
Leslie LaFawn.
Yes.
Tricia O'Keefe.
Yes.
And Desiree Potter is not present. Okay, you are in non-public at 7:16.